planes landing. The latest word being that they were supposed to be landing in about 5 minutes' time, but it appears that the weather across the Atlantic has affected Concorde. She's flying there at 60,000 feet, but even so, sometimes the weather gets in the way, so there's been a bit of a hold-up there. We're trying to find out. I would be interested to know whether the other planes are going to land all around the same time or not. We don't really know that yet. Let's hope we can get a little bit more information from one of our correspondents down there at Heathrow. Felicity Barb. Felicity, have you heard the latest on this? Answer me one question. My understanding was that the 3 planes would land in the following order. The one that come down from Edinburgh, the one that had a quick trip around the Bay of Biscay, and then the flight from America would bring up the rear. Is that still, as you understand it, the plan?
That is still the plan, yes. I was talking to the head of air traffic control earlier, Stephen James, who's been in his job for about 15 years dealing with Concorde arriving. They've never ever before had, as far as he knows, had 3 Concordes arriving in quick succession. The plan has always been that the first Concorde would arrive and then the others would arrive at 90-second intervals. And as far as we know, that is still the plan. So whether or not they're going to keep the Bay of Biscay Concorde and the Edinburgh Concorde flying around in circles while they wait for the JFA Concorde to catch up, we still don't know. But as far as I know, that is actually the plan, yes.
And we've been hearing from Catherine Jacob the idea that we're now being able to, we're saying on the screen there that we think the flights are going to land at 3 minutes past, 5 minutes past and 8 minutes past. It sounds like a bit of a railway timetable, and we all know that railway timetables are a bit dodgy in themselves, so we can't stick to that. Keep watching the ITV News channel for the latest on this. Felicity, we talk so much about excitement down there, and of course there will be a lot of people who will be very sad to see it go. There must be quite a few people, particularly people living not far from where you are now, who probably won't mind having their peace shattered every time Concorde lands and takes off. She does make, as I know well, a heck of a lot of noise.
She certainly does. I used to live in Berkshire and we used to time our clocks by Concorde every morning, 5 to 11. You could guarantee bang on time there would be the boom, and automatically we would go outside and look upwards into the sky to see the great graceful bird go over. So yes, it was a reassuring sight really. I think it was 5 to 11 and about 7 o'clock in the evening, so twice a day. But for those who live around the Heathrow perimeter, who are troubled of course by flights all through the day, the Concorde supersonic boom was particularly annoying and frustrating. And I was talking to one pilot earlier who was telling me that originally, of course, they had plans to have not 15 Concordes but 250 Concordes. So imagine the noise that would have caused. So I don't think that people living directly outside the Heathrow perimeter fence will be too upset at her demise, but plenty of other people will be. And of course, some of those are celebrities who are currently high above the Atlantic on board that New York Concorde that left JFK Airport a couple of hours ago, that we now know is due to arrive here at Heathrow at about 8 minutes past 4. Plenty of celebrities on board, including our very own Mary Nightingale.
Felicity,
also the chairman of British Airways, Lord Marshall, as well. He's on board.
Felicity, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Felicity, there, but we're just seeing a Concorde tripping around above Heathrow, the crowd looking up at her. There she is. Don't know which one. It obviously isn't the one from America. We hope we can find out shortly which one it is. Pretty high, that. I've got Richard Branson with me. Richard, how high is that plane? We're not sure, but obviously she's...
I think it's 44,500 feet.
Oh, well done. Right. Well, we don't know quite, but obviously quite visible from the ground. There is a bit of cloud around, but she's flying just below that. This looks like the Edinburgh Concorde, I've just been informed. Left Edinburgh, obviously not all that long ago. And I imagine what's happening is that she's flying around, they're trying to coordinate their arrivals. There she is, banking. This is above
I think one of the incredible things about the noise is the amount of people who actually do have Concordes go over them every day, and actually, you know, schools and things, and they actually don't mind the noise. They actually all troop out. And I think they still rather most of them would rather see them still come over them.
I agree with that. I must say, when I'm at home, and I live not too far from Heathrow or indeed Gatwick, when Concorde goes over, I say to people, that's Concorde. They say, how do you know? I say, you cannot be at all concerned that it's not. You know that noise. Felicity, are you seeing this Concorde? We can see Concorde. I don't know whether from where you are you can see this one going round.
We can actually. My cameraman's just pointed it out, and her white glistening in the sunshine just over my right shoulder. I'm not sure whether she's still in picture. Let me just turn around and have a look.
We can still see her.
No, I think she's gone.
We
I think
can
she's gone
see
into
her, Felicity.
clouds where we are. You can see her.
We can see. We're
on my shot.
We have the advantage of you slightly. She's a little bit faint now, but we still see her. That's the Edinburgh. For those who might be just tuning in, this is not the Concorde that's flown in from New York, not the very last one. That is intended that she should land. Probably she's going to come in, we think now, at about 8 minutes past 4. This is the Edinburgh Concorde. This will be the first one to land. I suppose she could be taking up position to land, although I'd be a bit surprised to see it from there, but never mind.
I suspect, Nick, if you are still with me, I suspect that what is actually happening is, as we suggested, they're probably circling a little, giving her a bit more time, giving JFK a bit more time to catch up with her. But I still don't have official word on that. I mean, we know that the plan was for them to land within a few minutes of each other, all three of those Concordes.
Yes, absolutely. That is the Edinburgh Concorde. We're just glimpsing her. That's anybody who knows anything about cameras will tell you that that's on the end of the lens. We can only just glimpse her there. She's going now slightly out of sight. And this is another shot now we're seeing. You can't quite see it, but behind that... Oh, there we are. There's a conventional aeroplane taking off. A great deal of fuss. That is Heathrow Airport. The planes are lining up there. Obviously, the runway concerned. Felicity, there's Concorde again. That's, again, I would imagine the Edinburgh Concorde. Calling it the Edinburgh Concorde.
It's like a giant swan coming into that.
A giant swan. Flight 9020. And obviously flown, of course, by British Airways, and people who won a competition. I'm not quite sure what questions they had to answer, but they've had a super day. And I presume they would have taken the plane out away from the mainland. It's worth remembering that she doesn't break the sound barrier over land ever. It's always out when they've left the coast behind, because the actual sonic boom. There's one or two interested people looking in.
Well, one of the interesting things is that Boeing had actually been the first to build Concorde when a Concorde would have actually got permission to fly to Los Angeles across America. And that would have made a big difference to the economics of it, I think.
Because as we keep saying, that's Richard Branson with us in the studio talking, as we know, only made in Britain. And only operated by British Airways and Air France. And Felicity Barr, I don't know whether you can still hear me, Felicity?
I certainly can, Nick.
Felicity, just remind me, which runway do they land on? You've got all your runway details in front of you there?
I wish I had the maps in front of you that I could tell you my many myriad of pieces of paper.
Well, that's right.
Long since blown away. It's very breezy here.
I only asked you that question to give myself time to look at my own piece of paper, and I hope that might tell me.
Go on,
as well.
you have a look at your piece of paper, and I'll tell you exactly who's on board the Edinburgh flight. It is competition winners, as you say. 100 people invited on board Concorde today. Of course, no fare-paying passengers today, all invited guests. Some of them are competition winners, and some are also British Airways staff, loyal British Airways staff who served on Concorde for many years, getting an extra flight for one last time. So a fairly nostalgic trip for them as well.
The plan was to land on the northern runway, and preferably from the east. Now, Felicity, can you see Concorde again now? We're getting quite a good sight now of flight 902, the one from Edinburgh. I don't know whether
my cameraman is attempting to pick her up.
Yeah, well, we can see, we've got a very nice shot of her. We can see her very clearly. The sky looks pretty clear.
Beautiful.
Some high cloud.
They're very, very pleased, actually, here at Heathrow Airport and, of course, with British Airways with the weather today, because it could have been so awful, so gloomy, foggy and cloudy. But for her final day, the weather's been pretty good.
Indeed. Catherine Jacob is also there with the crowd. Catherine, I hope you can hear me. Catherine, are people on the ground there seeing what we're seeing?
Well, Nick, I'm not quite sure what you're seeing.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll explain it to you. In the centre of our screen now, we can see the Edinburgh Concorde, obviously over Heathrow. We're not quite sure. Oh, I can now see. Now, is that another? That looks like a two Concordes. We can now see, Catherine, just let me say, we think that's two Concordes inside there, yes? The first one's coming in now, and behind her should be the one from the Bay of Biscay. That's a sight. I don't ever recall seeing that before. Perhaps we have glimpsed it during the day, but I don't think so. Two Concorde. Oh, and another rather dreary ordinary plane drifts past. We get rid of that as quickly as we can. There's Concorde, like a sort of, I keep saying Concorde. Of course, there are several Concordes. We can see two of them now. Now, here she comes. The first Concorde coming in, the last day of commercial flights, heading for Heathrow. It's
Mike?
just, I make the time, just past 4 o'clock. We were told she'd land at 3 minutes past 4. She's going to be slightly ahead of schedule by the look of it. Here it comes, flight 9020 from Edinburgh. Here she comes now. Remember, this is not the flight from New York. This is not the final one we're looking at. The first of the last three. Here she comes. Let's hear her come in. There we are. I made it a minute past 4. The Edinburgh flight, first of the last three, with 100 competition winners on board, landing at Heathrow Airport. End of an era, indeed. Got the full sound there, the noise she makes. She lands fast, takes off fast. That strange drooping nose. Of course, the idea being that once the plane is in the air, the nose is lifted up to get that wonderful supersonic shape. The plane then, when she's flying supersonic, actually stretches out, adds at least several inches, I think even a bit more than that. And there she is, 9020, heading for there. And here come numbers 2 and 3. That's the one you see on the right of your screen now is the plane that's buzzed around the Bay of Biscay today, quick day trip. And behind her, up on the left of your screen, the very final commercial Concorde. Flown in from JF Kennedy Airport in New York. Aboard, I might say, our own Mary Nightingale, amongst all the other celebrities. We hope to be having a word with her when she lands, and she'll be reporting very fully for the ITV Evening News at 6:30. She's finished a caviar, a smoked salmon, not to say a drop or two of champagne, not too much we hope. Here comes the second Concorde landing. She's been on a flight round the Bay of Biscay. Just a couple of minutes behind that first Concorde. And let's hear this one come down. Not a noise you're going to hear for much longer. That 401 for the first one, 403 for the second Concorde on this, their last day of commercial service. That one has been on a trip around the Bay of Biscay, giving those aboard a bit of a taste of what it's like to fly at over 1,300 miles an hour, twice the speed of sound, to fly supersonic. As I was saying before, they don't fly supersonic until they get away from land to fly over the sea because of the sonic boom. It was decided that they didn't want to rattle people's windows and frighten animals and things, people, so they now fly at ordinary speeds until they leave the coast. They won't be doing it anymore, unfortunately. And here comes the third Concorde, the very last in commercial service. This indeed is an historic moment, making her way oh so gently. You wouldn't believe the speed, of course. They land rather faster than most aircraft. I'm glad to say I have been on it a couple of times, and I do remember very clearly that as you take off and land, you know it. Here she comes, the flight from JFK across the Atlantic. Not quite the very quick time that we were hoping for, but 3.5 hours, just about 3.5 hours. You won't be able to do this anymore. Here she comes, the final Concorde from New York to London. Just about to touch down at London's Heathrow Airport. Thousands of people are there. Here she comes. Let's hear her. On the 24th of October 2003, the end of an aviation era. The final Concorde in passenger service touched down at London's Heathrow Airport. Making her way now to where the VIP passengers will be disembarking. We hope to be talking to some of them very shortly. Huge numbers of people have turned out at Heathrow. The police did say earlier on, begging people not to swarm to the airport. There you can see, I think behind there we can glimpse some of the people. There's Concorde, there's that final Concorde swinging round, the great nose jutting forward. Catherine Jacob has been there with all the crowd of people. I hope she can hear me. Catherine, what did the people with you make of that?
I can hear you indeed, Nick. Well, what a moment, 3 moments. You saw them coming in and everyone here was on tenterhooks. In fact, what's happened is many of the seats behind me are now empty because they all rushed over to the fence over there, and some of them were trying to get under it as the last Concorde came in there. But the people behind me actually did shed a tear. It is a sad moment, isn't it? I mean, it's such a majestic, beautiful plane. To think we'll never see it again in our skies is a pretty horrible thought, really. But yes, very much excitement. The children who were here particularly are running around, and they were really awestruck. You could see it in their eyes. We've got Union Jacks waving. We had people giving a standing ovation. And then at one point, when the second Concorde came in, the Heathrow travel bus parked in front of the stand. So for a minute, we couldn't see it. But then it moved away, so it was all right again. But yeah, it's been a great day. But as we've been saying all day, yes, one of excitement and a great spectacle. But a bit of an anticlimax now. That's it, isn't it, Nick? It's all over, and people now are kind of just looking on mistily, you know, looking at Concorde taxiing. But that's it. She's not going to go back up again.
Indeed, Catherine. Richard Branson is with me here in the studio. Catherine Jacob, our reporter there, saying, you know, well, it's all over. It's all a bit sad. We're just looking now. I think we're going to glimpse, Richard, all 3 of those Concorde. The last one just moved into position there. That was quite a stunning sight, wasn't it? To see 2 Concordes in the air at once, to see the final one land.
It was a privilege to watch all 3 of them. It was just absolutely incredible. Somehow when the nose is drooping, it's almost like the Concorde itself is saying how sad it is to land. It's almost like it's speaking. Anyway, if it really is the end, it's a very, very, very sad but poignant and very, very beautiful experience.
We know that you're among those who would like to see Concorde stay flying in one way or another. Realistically, do you think that is possible?
If there's a will by all concerned, it's definitely possible. And we just have to hope, actually, in a sense that today, the emotional day of just sort of seeing the end, that people don't feel let's close the book.
There's the 3 of them together. Look at that. The tails of 3 Concordes. As Richard so rightly put it, those drooping noses almost as... Well, that one's actually not drooping.
They've come back up. They've stopped drooping.
They've pulled their noses up, you know. It's a bit like sort of mum saying, you know, make sure you wipe your nose. They pull them up and they look all right, don't they?
Possibly up.
That's right. The 3 of them there, all stopped. Engines will find those engines making all that incredible amount of noise. And there's the Union flag flying proudly. Other dreary, slow aeroplanes taking off in front of them, but, you know, we shall not see their like again, of course. Felicity Barr has... she's rather fallen in love with her own particular Concorde there. But Felicity, what did you think?
That was absolutely fantastic. We had a grandstand view from where we were. The hundreds of media poised on our perch watched as they came in one by one, and we said it was going to be about 90-second intervals, and they pretty much got it right, didn't they? But what a fantastic sight, and I'm so pleased that the great British weather didn't let Concorde down at its final hour. We had a fantastic view, really. Sun glistening on the white body, and there is really no other aircraft quite like her, is there?
There isn't. Interesting, this picture, because behind it, well, we've gone round to the other side now, but when we see the front of those Concordes again, watch out for all the cranes in the background, because that is the building of Terminal 5, an absolutely huge construction site at Heathrow. And I suppose, there's a lot of British Airways people lined up on the underneath. There goes down the nose, there goes the nose, drooping down. Look at that. That reminds you of when they lower the colours and all that sort of thing, Richard Branson, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And look how sad and forlorn she looks like that. But anyway,
a tear almost there. Oh, we're getting very emotional. But as I was saying, behind you might catch a glimpse now. There are cranes dominating the skyline, the building of Terminal 5. Rather ironic that you know, we don't think we've got space in the skies. People don't want to pay the money or whatever for Concorde, but more and more people are flying. The desperation to have more air travel is definitely there, Richard Branson.
yes, I mean, the sad thing is that governments didn't deal with sort of infrastructure problems in Britain, 10 years ago when we needed runways, we needed railways working, we needed undergrounds invested in. But anyway, at least now these things are being addressed.
Well, there we are. If you're just joining us, the news is that the final Concorde flight has landed. 3 of them came in, 4:01, 4:03 and 4:05. And it was 4:05, the very last one, came in from JF Kennedy with all her VIP passengers on board. We hope to be speaking a little bit later to some of those people who enjoyed that last taste of supersonic flight, and indeed members of the crew as well, possibly. Before that, Catherine Jacob has been there with people on the ground, some of them described earlier a bit unkindly, I thought, by one of my colleagues as anoraks. Well, I hope they had the anoraks on today. It was pretty chilly, I would think. Catherine, you've got some people there to speak to, I think.
I have indeed, and if they are wearing anoraks, as you say, it's justified. It's freezing out here, Nick. But as I've been saying, it's a mixed atmosphere of excitement and sadness here today as well. It's pretty busy now. You can see everyone mingling around in front of the camera. It's quite a party atmosphere for many, but some sad people too. I've got a former Concorde pilot here, in fact, with his family. Now, Daniel, you've just seen that. You flew Concorde for 3 years.
Yes.
How are you feeling?
Very proud, a little bit nostalgic, but really pride is the main thing. We're very lucky to have had such a wonderful aeroplane for so long.
Now, you've had a treat. I mean, you're used to Concorde, but seeing those 3 planes come in there, what a sight.
Lovely, absolutely magnificent. It'll be a long time till something's repeated like that.
Now, how are you feeling about the fact that you're never going to see it in the air again? I mean, are you feeling bitter about it?
No, I don't think bitter is the right word. I'd like to have seen it carry on, but for a variety of reasons, there's a point at which it stops, and this is it. It's a great shame.
Well, it's a great atmosphere down here today. I've seen thousands of people down there. Well, it looks like thousands to me. Anyway, let's ask Joseph here. Joseph, you've got the flag in your mouth at the moment, but you saw the Concorde today. Have you ever seen anything like it? It was great, wasn't it? What did you think? How did you feel when they landed?
Bit upset because I thought I wanted it to carry on so I could go on it.
Have you not been on one of your dad's Concordes before?
Nope.
You know you're never going to get the chance?
Nope.
Oh, no. And what about Alicia? What did you think about it all?
I knew it was really sad.
They're beautiful, aren't they?
Yeah.
Have you ever been on a Concorde either? Has your daddy never... So how come you've never taken them on Concorde before?
There's an age limit for me to take them on, but Claire's been on Concorde, so...
Fair enough, fair enough. All right, well, we'll let you watch the show that's going on, them taxiing at the moment. So, Nick, as you can see, slightly somber mood here because it is all over, but it has been an exciting day for everyone and a cold one. So, as I said, if they are wearing anoraks, it's justified. And, yes, as you can see, they're taxiing. We've got a great view here, but there are people mingling all over the place. They were asked originally, to be fair, to stay away because of traffic and safety reasons, but a lot of them have come down, and who could blame them really on a day like today?
Well, welcome back to my area of Heathrow on the perch where all the media are massed waiting the arrival of the 3 Concordes. They're due to come round the corner around the hangar, which you might just be able to see in shot in a couple of minutes. And with me now, and watching as that historic 3 Concorde landing happened, is Christopher Oliver, the author and also a former pilot, one of the very early pilots from the 1976. Chris, what did you make of that landing?
Well, it was wonderful, wasn't it? You know, Concorde seems to perform when she knows she has to. I remember the first takeoff, 21st of January 76, split screen on the television, Air France taking off from Paris, simultaneously with British Airways taking off from here at Heathrow. And surprise, no surprise, Concorde performed immaculately, 3 coming in just as predicted.
It was about the 90-second mark, wasn't it, between each of them?
Wonderfully organised.
I know the people up in air traffic control will be delighted about that. I was speaking to one of their chaps earlier. Air France, we were saying, actually it doesn't seem to have made a great deal of the passing of Concorde. We're making a great big thing out of it here in Britain, but why are Air France not celebrating her?
Well, it's difficult to say. I think they felt rather sad that their services came to slightly boycotted by the Americans after the Chirac decision not to support the Iraq War. They certainly didn't have the fanfare of trumpets that we're having, and possibly the very sad accident at Gonesse. It's got to be said that it wasn't Concorde's fault, but maybe there was an element of that in the fact that they stopped before us and the fact that they didn't make such a fanfare of that occasion.
So, of course, we in Britain are celebrating Concorde. We're expecting her to come round the corner any minute now. In fact, I think our cameraman's going to pan round and just wait the arrival of the 3 Concordes all in one go. And actually, Chris, first time we've ever seen 3 Concordes land in quick succession like that.
Well, I don't think it is, because I can't remember which year, probably 84, 85, there was a formation of 4 Concordes, flew in formation and landed in sequence. So it has happened before. But I must say, it's not a frequent occurrence. One of the extraordinary things about Concorde, which has to be said, is that it's such an inspiration to people. It's much more of an inspiration than I would ever have imagined. I mean, look at the people who come to watch Concorde today. Quite extraordinary.
And they're not just anoraks. We were very unkindly talking about the fans as anoraks, but they're not anoraks, are they? They're enthusiasts.
They're enthusiasts, and as you see, I'm wearing a coat.
Indeed, and you're not an anorak, you're an ex-pilot yourself. In fact, plenty of ex-pilots are here today to watch Concorde's final landing.
That's true, and of course we're all extremely sad that Concorde, which we felt was going to go on forever, is coming to what we consider a slightly premature end in service. Let's keep our fingers crossed that there's going to be a satisfactory successor sooner rather than later.
I know you're keeping your fingers crossed. I know some of the other pilots are as well. And we must mention that the cabin crew, of course, who've worked so hard on Concorde, a lot of them earlier on were going into the Concorde that's behind me and having their pictures taken for the final time. Many of them were on the Edinburgh flight coming down for the final time. Very nostalgic.
Not only that, but one cabin crew member who was on one of the flights is due to get married on the 28th to the first officer on the New York flight. If I've got the facts right, I hope I have.
Have you got the invite to the wedding?
Not yet.
You probably will now. They're going to have to now you've said it live on television. Chris, thanks very much indeed. Lovely to get the memories of Chris there, Nick.
Well, Felicity, thank you very much indeed. I'm in the studio here with Richard Branson, a man with an interest in this subject, runs a rival airline to British Airways, but he's wallowing in nostalgia with the rest of us today. Just remind ourselves that the final Concorde flight landed at 4:05. It was at 3:15 that it actually came over from the Atlantic and dropped below the speed of sound off the west coast of Ireland. So 3:15, it then took it another 3/4 of an hour just over to get to Heathrow itself. Among those on board, people like the film star Joan Collins, the ballerina, but Darcy Bussell, broadcaster Sir David Frost, the Formula One boss Bernie Ecclestone, and we do hope that we're going to see some of these people as they come down, get their sort of final thoughts. Most of them will have been what they call frequent flyers on Concorde. And also there, our own Mary Nightingale. She was up very bright and early this morning. I don't know about bright and early, very, very cold. We've got, we can see there's a red carpet actually being laid on there. You can see it there. Those last customers will get to walk along that, and we do hope to speak to them. As I say, Mary was up bright and early to get onto that, the final Concorde, looking forward to it, very proudly boasting on ITV's Lunchtime News about a ticket, talking about looking forward to the caviar to come. And she'll be reporting for the ITV Evening News at 6:30 on this rather extraordinary day. As I say, Richard Branson is with me. Richard, one of your aeroplanes in the background, look at that, Virgin. We timed that just for you.
Well, we're friendly. We've got friendly competitors with British Airways who will continue to compete and hopefully offer the consumers a good choice. Anyway.
Excellent. There we are. There's a Virgin plane and two Concordes. Rather emphasising, Richard, one point that I don't think people realise, she's not very big when it comes to an airplane, especially inside. We've heard a lot of this today. Quite a cramped plane by modern standards.
Yes, she's not a particularly comfortable plane to fly inside. She's a fast plane. And she's a beautiful plane from the outside. Well, she was a beautiful plane from the outside. Hopefully she still will be.
Sum up for me your feelings. We've been watching it and saw them land. When they actually came down, you saw that last Concorde. What did you think?
Well, I have a lake in the country, and we've got beautiful swans that, you know, and it was just like, you know, 3 swans coming in the early evening to land on the lake, and it's a magnificent sight. And seeing the Concordes coming in and land were like three beautiful birds, and it was wonderful to be here today to watch it.
And of course we keep saying sad day, and I suppose it's sad for one reason, in that technology kind of didn't go any further. It got stuck at this point, and something that Britain had done extremely well, we weren't able to carry on with. Just before you answer that, look at that. That's the fire brigade, the Heathrow Fire Brigade, their own salute to the Concordes, passing under a curtain of water. Another sad sight. There we go, and the water just drifting away. Richard, I was saying technology has come to a bit of a full stop here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the slightly, you know, the sad thing is that those planes do have 20 or 30 years life left in them. So it's not as if technology has come to a stop. It's a commercial decision to stop them when they've stopped them, and you know, there's still just the possibility that people might get around the table to try to, you know, to work out a way of keeping them flying in some form, so we will still see the beauty of Concorde in the sky. You
mentioned earlier friendly rivalry with British Airways. I mean, one does remember it wasn't always so. You've had your major battles with them, but tell me this about the airline, viewed dispassionately. Big airlines have been having a very, very rough time in recent years, but British Airways does seem to be weathering all those financial storms.
Yes, and I think that the battle now that Concorde's gone is going to be the battle to try to create the best airlines in the world. And you know, I mean, with Virgin Atlantic, we just introduced something called the Virgin Upper Class Suite, which we think is like bringing, you know, the most comfortable liner in the world into the air. And so again, competition is good for the consumer. We'll be fighting to improve the quality of our planes, and I'm sure they'll be doing the same. And I think British Airlines are ahead of the pack, so you know, I'm sure that British Airways and Virgin Atlantic will do well. The American carriers are languishing somewhat. They're not getting the passengers, and they're not really delivering on product.
What do you think is the balance of the argument about the great expansion of airports that's been suggested in the southeast of England? We mentioned earlier Terminal 5 is going ahead at Heathrow. That's going to be yet another massive expansion of that airport. There's talk of expanding Gatwick, of course, Stansted possibly. Obviously, from your point of view as an operator of airliners, you want to see more capacity, but is there a point where we ought to stop and think about what we're doing, eating up countryside and so on?
Well, we stopped and thought about 20 years ago, whilst the French and the Dutch and everybody else put extra runways into the airports, and it has held us back. I mean, Virgin Atlantic would be flying to many more cities, bringing fares down and competing, if we had the slots at the airports to do it. Because governments didn't make brave decisions 10, 15 years ago, and we already came to a full stop. We haven't been able to offer the service that we'd like to. I think this government will be brave and will add 1 or 2 extra runways, which this country desperately needs.
And those 1 or 2 extra runways might do it, at least for the sort of.
Well, I mean, to be honest, they'll be full up almost immediately. I mean, if you know, you actually need sort of about something like five new runways. Interestingly, environmentally, I mean, the planes are getting, you know, more and more fuel efficient. They're getting quieter and quieter. Concorde's maybe just disappeared, so that, you know, that's going to make a difference on the noise factor. And well, one of the biggest problems at the moment is because there's so few runways, the planes are just going round and round and round over our airports, waiting for slots to come in.
There is congestion in the sky.
Enormous congestion, enormous noise created from it. So if you had the runways, the planes would get in quickly and get their passengers off.
I think you were telling us earlier, you have had a flight on Concorde, but you went to Singapore, of all places. You haven't actually done the transatlantic run. You weren't among the frequent flyers because you were running a rival organisation. That's perhaps understandable.
Yeah, I think it would have been slightly difficult for me to justify to my staff if I'd started becoming a regular BA Concorde user.
But among the sort of people that, you meet in business and so on, and in the world of show business, you must have met people who were Concorde fanatics who said, oh, I couldn't be without it. I wonder how they're going to get on. How is Joan Collins going to get here in future, Sean?
Well, BA will be trying to persuade her to go on to BA's first class. We'll be trying to persuade her to go on to Virgin Atlantic's new upper class suite class. And since we charge half the price, I'm sure we'll be getting her.
Gosh, that sounds like a commercial for a minute.
Oh, come on, I've been here for an hour. I'm allowed to get my commercial in.
And we've showed a tail of your aircraft as well.
All right,
There's nothing we won't do for you. We are very grateful there, Richard Branson.
Thank
Thank you very much indeed, just for the moment. I just want to go back to Felicity Barr now. Felicity, remind us, the airborne celebrations, if you like, are over, aren't they, if I may put it that way? What's going to happen on the ground in the next half an hour or so?
Well, basically what's going to happen is that the 3 Concordes which have just landed are going to line up side by side next door to what you've affectionately called my Concorde, Charlie Alpha, who has been our backdrop for much of the day here on the ITV News channel. And then the guests will all depart, and the final guest will be from the Celebrity Concorde, the one that took off from New York a couple of hours ago, the one containing our very own Mary Nightingale. They will disembark and they will walk along the red carpet that has been specially set up just down below my perch. No doubt about it, there'll be lots of media trying to grab their attention as they walk past. I'm sure that's going to take a fair few minutes as people try to get hold of people like Sir David Frost, asking what the final flight was like. And then once they've filed past, what is supposed to happen right on cue at 5 o'clock is the chairman of British Airways, Lord Marshall, is due to give the farewell speech, if you like, to Concorde. Not exactly sure, haven't seen a copy of what the speech is going to say, but I suspect it's going to be full of platitudes and maybe a little bit of talk about the future, possibly even what's going to happen to the 5 operational Concordes which have now been decommissioned. We know, of course, that there have been fears that they might be sold to foreign countries. I spoke to the chief executive of BA, Rod Eddington, earlier, who assured me that they had no plans to sell Concorde to foreign countries. Some will end up in museums. Possibly one might even remain operational for special occasions, such as the Queen's fly past and things like that. So maybe Lord Marshall might give us a hint of what actually is going to happen to those 5 Concordes. But at the moment, we are awaiting the arrival of the 3 Concordes. I know you can see them at the moment, but I can't. They are getting ready down here by the hangar, the big British Airways hangar. They've cleared the space, they've cleared the bollards out of the way. The security people are in operation, and there are plenty of BA staff here as well to welcome those 3 Concordes.
Well, Felicity, thank you very much indeed. There's lots of remarkable sights today. Here's another one. Look, 2 Concordes lumbering slowly along, heading back to the hangar. For the last time, effectively, I mean, people keep saying that they might keep flying at air shows or whatever, but certainly as far as commercial service is concerned, and we should remind ourselves that Concordes fly normally every day of the week and have been flying very regular service indeed. Here comes one, there comes another. I say going back to their hangar, of course it's not quite true. They do need to get rid of their passengers first, but it'll all be done in a very orderly and friendly way, I'm sure. Whenever you travelled on Concorde, for those of us lucky enough occasionally to get the chance, you always felt rather special. Passengers were always treated like, oh, swinging away. Well, that was fun. We were always made to feel rather special. You didn't get the feeling that anybody was pushing and shoving you along. It wasn't quite the cattle truck that so many airliners were. But the point's been made again that Felicity Barr was showing us earlier in the day. Inside Concordes, they are quite small, quite cramped, and there's even been people who've said, well, I paid all that money, something like £7,000 it cost to get a ticket when you're paying full price. I paid all that money and still didn't have enough room for my feet. There's staff on the ground waving. Here we are, 4:30, just under half an hour ago, when these three Concordes landed, one after the other, 90 seconds apart, more waving. Very sad. People up on the top there, look, in the yellow fluorescent jackets. Concorde about to, one of the Concordes about to let her passengers off. Catherine Jacob has been with the people on the ground, the spectators during the day, those people who saw them all come in for themselves. Well, Catherine, have you got anyone else there to have a chat with?
I have indeed, Nick. Yes, I was just going to say that it's been a brilliant day for everyone here. Everyone I've spoken to, even if they are a bit sad, they've had a fantastic time, and it seems to have gone very quickly. Dare I say it? It's flown, in fact. But over here are a few people who've been here all day, and they've got their digital cameras out at the moment. I think this gentleman, in fact, saw the very first Concorde flight, Nick. The Concorde's maiden voyage, didn't you?
Yes.
Tell me a bit about that.
So on the 9th of April 1969, it flew from Filton, where it was built, to RAF Fairford, a 20-minute testing flight, and it was about another 7 years before it actually entered commercial service.
Well, I won't ask how old you are, sir, but you must have seen a few Concordes in your time if you saw the first one.
Yes, I have, and I've been lucky enough to fly on it in August this year, as soon as I heard that British Airways were stopping flights. And I was determined to come here today to see the final commercial flight.
And did it live up to your expectation when you saw those three come in?
Indeed it did, yes. It was a stirring moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, well, if I move on to you now, you're an engineer. You haven't worked on Concorde as such, but
I'm
you're...
young for that.
No, well, okay, fair enough. But you're very sad about today as well, aren't you?
Yeah, as an engineer, it's one of those things. Everything in engineering goes forward. Things are faster, better. This is the biggest step backwards. After today, you will not be able to fly at Mach 2 on a commercial aircraft. I mean, it just is the wrong way around, in my opinion. And I think a lot of the people feel that way. It's just a sad day. I've been flown Concorde. It's part of you. You've been on it. You feel for it, and like this gentleman here, it's sad to actually see. You have to be here, but where do we go from here?
Well, that's it. I mean, will they fly them again? Will someone else come over and take over? I think quite a few people here have said their hopes have been on Mr. Branson, who's sitting back in our studio. But you, madam, have come over. You're originally Australian, aren't you? But you've come here today just to see Concorde. You're a big fan, aren't you?
Yes, from Holland, from Amsterdam.
Ah, right.
Especially today.
What, you flew in this morning?
Yes, and going back this tonight.
So has it been worth the wait?
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. It was beautiful. It's a very emotional feeling when you see her landing and seeing her in the sky. It's the plane that should be flying and not standing in a museum. So it's
very true, very true. All right, well, thank you very much indeed to all of you, and echoing a few of the feelings here today, Nick. It is a very mixed views, but generally very saddened by the demise. Children in particular here who have been too young really to know Concorde, too young to go on it anyway. We saw a pilot who brought his children down. They'd been too young to actually fly on the plane. Were here and they were really excited. You could see it when they were looking up. They couldn't believe what they were seeing, the sight of that silhouette coming into land here, and the noise. I mean, you've seen quite a few planes landing here as we've been here, but normally you'd think that was pretty noisy compared to Concorde. So, yeah, absolutely, everyone kind of starting to go away in dribs and drabs here today, but it has been a great day for everyone, and they were all determined to come here and say their own farewell in person to Concorde.
Catherine Jacob, thank you very much indeed. Well, there we're just watching the Concordes doing the old thing. You know what happens? You land and then you spend ages while the plane manoeuvres around to let you off. And actually that's what's happening here. It's now just about 29 minutes since the last Concorde arrived. Three of them came down at 4:01, the one from Edinburgh, 4:02, the one that had been going around the Bay of Biscay, and then at 4:05, the epoch-making moment when the last commercial flight from JF Kennedy Airport in New York, that touched down at Heathrow. We're now seeing Concordes disappearing on their way round to let off their passengers. The flight that we are interested, I believe now we can talk Mary Nightingale, who was on that flight from JFK. I believe we can talk to her any moment, so I'm looking forward very much to that. And she'll be joining us particularly for the evening news, the ITV evening news at 6:30, for a full account of her day, eating caviar and drinking champagne up on 60,000 feet above the Atlantic. But of course it was also some interesting talk she had with people, and the whole experience of flying on Concorde. Anyone who's done it, never going to forget it. Mary, are you there?
I am indeed, Nick. Hello.
Well, welcome to Heathrow. What was it like?
It has been the most amazing experience. As we came into Heathrow, we were obviously in formation with the other two Concordes that were coming in at the same time. And as we looked down, we could just see hundreds of thousands of people gathered all around the airport and beyond. And on the tarmac itself, just thousands and thousands, it seemed, of high-vis vests, where every single member of the ground crew and cabin crew had come out into the open to witness the final homecoming of Concorde. It was an extraordinary experience.
What was it like on the flight itself?
Yeah, well, the flight itself was great, actually. I mean, it felt a little bit like a party, I must say, although a lot of us were having to get a great deal done. There were 7 broadcasters on board and a lot of print journalists as well, so it was quite frantic up here as we all tried to get our bits and pieces done, our pieces to camera and so on. But, of course, there was the celebrities sitting there as well. Joan Collins, Jodie Kidd, Darcy Bustle, Christy Brinkley, remember her? The Uptown Girl, and Jeremy Clarkson, who really knows a bit about speed when he encounters it. And it was just an enormously friendly, very, very happy experience. Even the stewards and stewardesses, despite the enormous amount of work they were having to do under very difficult circumstances, because it's quite a narrow plane, and they were having to get up and down and serve people with drinks as well as, you know, bypass all the press and so on. Everyone maintained a very, very happy mood throughout, and I think we're just all thrilled to be here, really.
Were there lots of stories about previous Concorde flights, people having their memories?
Yes, there were. There were some people on board who'd been on Concorde many hundreds of times. Sir David Frost reckons he'd been on something like 300 times. Now, he was sitting up the front today. Normally, he would sit in row 23, which he said to me he regards as being a little bit more private. He can normally spread out a bit and have a nap. But today, they put him up the front. He didn't seem too bothered, I must say. He was quite happy to be there. But so many people had very happy memories. Actually, some of the most interesting people on board were perhaps not the most instantly recognisable, the most glamorous, rich, famous, whatever, where they were the people who even worked on the original Concorde when it first came out. I spoke to the man who was the commercial director of Rolls-Royce in the 1970s when they produced the engine, who flew on Concorde even before it was launched commercially. Those sort of people have the most extraordinary memories. Really, really interesting.
Now, at the moment, Mary, you're presumably, we're looking at pictures of Concordes rolling along. That's presumably you. You're waiting to get to the point where you can get off. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it's actually quite eerie on board now because they've turned off the engines. We're now waiting, I think, to get clearance to come into the hangar. We're looking out of the window. We can see lots of people in high-vis vests. But the lights are off in here. It's getting a little bit hot. And it's sort of a little bit eerie, Nick, as I say, because nothing much is happening. We've had this enormous noise for the last 3.5 hours as those amazing Rolls-Royce engines have been powering us at Mach 2, 60,000 feet above the Atlantic. But now we're sitting on the ground in London, and guess what? There's a delay. I'm not quite sure what it is. I mean, not that we're worried, of course. It's great to be on board, and we're savouring the past few minutes, you know, and the final few minutes before we all disembark for the last time. But I'm not quite sure what's going on. I'll let you know as soon as I can.
Well, I can't help you very much. We're looking at pictures of what must be your Concorde. There's a man at the front fiddling around doing something or other. I'm not quite sure what. They seem to be linking something up, but there isn't much other activity. I can't really help you. Tell me this, Mary. Terrible temptation, I suppose, to pinch a few souvenirs. Have you spotted anybody whipping the odd bit of fixtures and fittings?
I might have seen people pocketing the odd napkin ring or two. I think Concorde has always been a little bit of a target for souvenir hunters, and I think BA's attitude to it, I mean, I may be wrong, but I think BA's attitude to it is the ticket price is so high that I think they probably factor in people taking a few souvenirs when they're on board. And today there were actually several items that were specifically dated for today. They were souvenir issues of the napkin ring, the menu. We've got a very nice little notepad which says the date, the 24th of October 2003. So I think they are designed to be taken with them. I suppose, arguably, BA is going to have no further use for these things after today. But well, you feel quite lucky, I must say, to get your hands on a little commemorative napkin ring. It's a real treat. It's something quite special. I don't think it's leaving. Do you, Nick?
Well, no, not at all. I look forward very much, Mary, to seeing you back here at ITN and, seeing the souvenirs that you've got. Tell me, the celebrities with you, presumably they just had to sit there and enjoy the champagne and the caviar while you were busy working, as you've emphasised to us.
Well, not that we didn't have the odd bit of champagne and caviar as well, Nick, because out of, obviously, journalistic instinct, we have to investigate every single aspect of the Concorde flight. But, yes, I mean, they probably were having a more relaxing time than we were. It was quite funny, because all of us had our own mini-cams all the American news journalists and all the Brits as well, and the print journalists had their own notepads, and everybody was having their photograph taken up by the machometer. And you know, the funny thing, Nick, sorry to interrupt you, the funny thing is, you know how it is. News journalists can be a little bit cynical, a little bit blasé about the experiences they have. But I can honestly say that today I have not seen one iota of cynicism. Everybody is absolutely thrilled to be here.
That makes,
no matter how rugged they are, they're just absolutely delighted.
That makes me very proud of all my colleagues. Mary, I don't know whether you've got any of those celebrities sort of anywhere close to you.
I'm afraid I don't at the moment. I'm sort of just sitting by the machometer, and they're beyond the wall, and I'm not allowed to get up because actually the aircraft is still moving. It's not moving very fast, but inching its way along. So the cabin crew are rightly saying to us, you've got to stay put. Actually, I probably shouldn't even have my telephone on, but I wanted to call and let you know what was going on.
Well, very grateful to you indeed. We're all obviously very envious that you've had that flight. Tell me one thing, Mary. It's sometimes said one doesn't want to be an old curmudgeon on days like this, but it is rather cramped in there. Is that your view? I mean, if you were a paying passenger, what would you think?
Well, you know, I have been on Concorde before, and I was expecting something that would be a little bit uncomfortable. But, you know, I think it's a little bit of inverted snobbery, Nick. It is supremely comfortable. It's very luxurious, very comfortable seat. Yes, you don't have acres of space to walk around as you would do if you were in first class, perhaps on a modern 747. But, frankly, there is so much else that it offers as well as that. It really doesn't matter. You're beautifully looked after. The food is very nice. They ply you with champagne if you're lucky enough to be able to sit there and drink it and not mind about getting tipsy. It is a very luxurious experience. I think it's a little bit of a fashionable thing to say, oh, it's noisy, oh, it's cramped, oh, you know. I think people like to make themselves seem a little bit blasé by criticising it. I have nothing but praise for Concorde. It's a great machine. And you know, it's not really about the comfort and the interior space anyway. It's purely about the speed. And actually, if one looks beyond the glamour and the fame and the celebrities and so on, what Concorde has been most useful for is businessmen who've actually been able to cross the Atlantic and have a meeting in London and then get to New York and have a whole day there as well. And that, I think, is what it's been, that's how it's really earned its spurs as actually an instrument for business. Yeah, the glamour is something on top of that, but the businessmen, they say, it got me there fast, that's all I wanted.
I was going to say to you that in your conversations with people, apart from sort of glamorous folk like yourself, I have to say, Mary, but the business people particularly, they did say to you, did they, that it was really very useful, and now they're going to have to slog along with everybody else taking, what, more or less double the time?
Yeah, very much so. I think, funnily enough, it's not the outward journey to New York that it has ever been in dispute. You know, when they come back, often people have said, well, I've taken the outward journey on Concorde and I've come back on a 747 because I could sleep in a bed overnight. But the outward journey, I think, is going to be a lot more difficult for people because it's going to take, you know, 6-7 hours. And that is going to be a whole day out of a businessman or woman's schedule. And, of course, it's going to affect, I think, the way that things work. You know, Nick, one very, very sobering fact, and I don't know whether you had actually heard this before, but Concorde lost 40 of its regular passengers in September the 11th. 40 of its regular passengers were killed in the Twin Towers disaster. And I think that was perhaps enough to make the difference to whether it was going to be feasible or not as a fare-paying aircraft. These people used to take Concorde almost like a bus service, and so many of them are no longer here. But I wonder whether that was what made the difference in the end.
Well, Mary, it's been great to talk to you. Just to explain that Mary Nightingale is... my colleague is on the last of the Concordes, just inching its way forward now, preparing to let the passengers off. Mary, thank you very much indeed. We look forward to hearing from you a little bit later, especially I look forward to you when you come on the ITV Evening News. The two of us will be here at 6:30 for that. Thanks a lot. Now then, let us carry on. We are looking now at the last Concorde to land on British soil, or at least the last one to carry passengers in regular commercial service. The Union flags, a pair of them flying there from the flight deck. The plane landed 3/4 of an hour ago, just under 3/4 of an hour ago, after its flight from New York's lasting about 3.5 hours. The journey took, flying at twice the speed of sound for much of the way, 60,000 feet above the Atlantic. This will not be happening or not be possible anymore. Felicity, I don't know whether you were able to hear any of what Mary Nightingale was saying, but now just before I come to Felicity, let's just look at this. There are the pilots leaning right out by that famous drooped nose, waving away, waving thumbs up. Well, do you know, isn't that a wonderfully British moment? You'd think they were celebrating the start of something, not the end of something. I'm sure a lot of people will say, what a shame we can't somehow take this technology forward. We can't build a new range of supersonic airliners. We would want to make them quieter, I'm sure, but the speed was obviously very attractive. We had Sir Richard Branson here in the ITV News Channel studio. He was saying that he's looking ahead to the era, the next era perhaps, when we will have aircraft that might get to Australia in an hour and a half, space vehicles. But the truth of the matter is, he may be right, but there's precious little work going on at the moment. The emphasis now very much is on making existing aircraft bigger and more comfortable, on building more and more aircraft space on the ground, expanding airports like mad. We trust that that plane is being towed and that the man is not steering it, because if he's steering it, he's about to thump that nose into something appalling. No, it's being safely towed into that hangar, or beside a hangar, I think it is, where the passengers will be allowed to disembark, the VIP passengers, and everybody will want to say to them, what was it like? We've already heard what it was like. Mary Nightingale, our Mary Nightingale, has given us a very good description. We look forward very much to seeing her pictures later. Felicity Barr is, like me, gnawing her fingernails down with jealousy, I should think. But there we are, Felicity. Some of us have got to stay on the ground, haven't we?
Absolutely, not just gnawing my fingers in jealousy, but shivering with cold as well, because I have to say it's been a lovely, beautiful day here for the final day of Concorde, but it's also been very, very chilly indeed. I can tell you where I am is on a very long platform, a perch, where the many dozens of television cameras and stills photographers are manned, ready to see the Concordes as they round the corner towards the hangar. And in fact, I'm not sure whether you can see our live shot at the moment, but the hangar doors are opening, and inside the hangar at the moment you can see there is one Concorde already inside, and also the hundreds of guests who've been invited to come down here and witness the arrival of the final Concorde. Yes, very jealous, of course, of... So go ahead, Nick.
Sorry, I was just saying, absolutely, we can see all those people now, vast. We can see a Concorde, and underneath it a vast number of people moving forward, presumably to catch a glimpse of that very last Concorde, as you were saying.
Absolutely, I suspect they'll give some sort of a salute or a wave as Concorde comes on by. And the shot that you're seeing at the moment, the Concorde will come past that. This is the New York Concorde that our Mary Nightingale is on board. She'll come past, and then the passengers will disembark, and they'll go down a lovely red carpet that's been put out for them. And there are massed ranks of cameras, photographers and journalists below me as well, hoping to, first of all, take photographs, and secondly, to talk to some of the celebrities as they disembark from Concorde about their experiences. We've heard already from Mary, but of course there are other people like Sir David Frost on board, and I think she mentioned Chrissy Brinkley, the former model and ex-partner, I think, of the musician Billy Joel. People like that who I'm sure will stop to have a word and describe their experiences of a final flight on board Concorde. But I have to say, I think things are running a little behind schedule, Nick, because as I understood the timetable, the chairman of British Airways, Lord Marshall, is due to give a speech at 5 o'clock, and there you can see Concorde with the Union Jack out the corner of the cockpit. What a fantastic sight that is. It really is quite incredible. I mean, I am jealous of Mary being on the flight, but it has been incredible to watch all three Concordes land this afternoon, and a really thrilling experience. I'm not a great aviation aficionado, but it is something quite spectacular, I have to say.
Isn't it marvellous? The plane that's flown at 1,350 miles an hour, twice the speed of sound, ends her final day in commercial service at walking pace, quite literally. Look at those people strolling, actually. They're not even having to hurry, are they? And she's towed so gracefully and carefully, that huge long nose swinging round. There's another Concorde parked right ahead of her. So there's one in the hangar, one outside there, and another, the other Concorde. That's the one that's flown in from New York. What a sight! We need a touch of the artists here, don't we, to paint that scene. Look at that sky. An absolutely beautiful...
Very British, isn't it, Nick?
Very British in all sorts of ways, I think. Celebrating the end of things, we seem to be rather good at that. Now this is...
We are. The French, as I was saying earlier, haven't done anything like this for their final Concordes. They've kind of pretty much left it up to the British, actually.
We do nostalgia well. Some people say we overdo nostalgia well, but I won't comment on that. Well, this is the final Concorde coming in. In a few moments, the passengers will disembark, and as Felicity Barr has been saying, the chairman, Lord Marshal, the chairman of British Airways, is due to make some final remarks. Felicity, I guess a lot of people will be interested in this one really rather simple question. Does Concorde have any sort of future at all?
Absolutely, and the majority of British Airways staff and former pilots I've been speaking to today are absolutely determined that there should remain one Concorde being operational. Obviously it wouldn't be doing scheduled flights, but would be able to do some special trips, such as for charity perhaps, also giving a salute to the Queen, or many other things appearing at air shows and things like that. They're absolutely determined that one of those Concordes should remain operational. And I spoke to the Chief Executive of British Airways this morning, Rod Eddington, and I did say to him, what are the chances of you keeping one of these beautiful aircraft operational and flight-worthy? He refused to be drawn on that, but I suspect an announcement will be made over the next few days. In fact, I'm sure Lord Marshal may even allude to that in his speech, which is due to take place in the next half an hour or so. I think most people recognise this is a piece of aviation history. It's a piece of British history as well, and I think most people would be delighted to know that at least one of these beautiful, beautiful aircraft will still be operational for special purposes.
Indeed, there we are, the final Concorde getting pretty close now to the point where she can stop and let off her passengers. The crew waving away there. They don't have to steer her now because she's being towed very slowly, I mean inching along. You can see the staff on the ground there accompanying her. They're going at walking pace, aren't they? So they are very much at walking pace, strolling pace. Interesting that when we look at the Concorde this way, it looks like sort of quite a nice bright afternoon. When we look, we get the shot from the other side, we can see that it's getting towards dark now on what has been a very... There we are, look at that, what a chilly evening. Almost an angry sky, I think, saying, what have you done? You've let Concorde stop? What a sad thing. That's presumably Concorde moving straight up towards you now, Felicity, isn't it?
Absolutely, almost dead straight for me. It's a fantastic sight. You probably can't see, but below me there are more BA staff who are clapping and cheering the arrival and waving to the pilots as they hang out the Concorde cockpit. It's really a fantastic sight, and there is just a few rays of sunshine as well to welcome her home. It is very strange to think that it was back in the 1950s that they first dreamt up Concorde. First test flight was back in 1969, and now all these decades later, her era is finally over. We've been talking about it all day, a sense of nostalgia, a sense of sadness, but also a sense of a party atmosphere. Mary was talking about it being on board, a bit like a great big farewell party, and I think that's exactly what we're going to see here right now.
Indeed, we did see, you mentioned those staff, we did catch that. I think the plane has now stopped. Is she in position now?
It has.
Right. And
she is.
I do hope the captain doesn't climb out any further, otherwise he's going to have a very quick trip to the tarmac. They're waving, wave them away. We really need some music at this point, Felicity. There isn't actually a band, or is there a band? I don't see one or hear one.
No, and I don't think there have been plans for a band, actually. I certainly haven't heard one practicing and haven't seen any band members. I think maybe it's possible in this day and age of the media that the media wouldn't have liked the band because perhaps the band would drown out the noises of our voices. And of course there are so many media packed along this platform above Concorde right now. There you can see the steps going up to the front door of Concorde. And I think that's probably the reason is the fact that we in the media would have said, oh, too much noise, it's going to affect our live coverage. Because of course live coverage is what it's all about, as we well know. Steps just going into place right now. Going to be interesting to see who comes off the plane first. What are your bets on?
Indeed, Felicity, I'm just hoping that I know who it is. I could recognise Mr. Clarkson and Ms. Collins and Mary Nightingale. I'm not sure about one or two of the other young pop stars. I might miss them, so you might need to help me.
I'll do my best. What's the betting? It might be the pilots who come off first. I don't know. I don't know what the etiquette of these situations is, actually.
Pilots usually sort of hang back, don't they? But I don't know on this occasion who it would be. Maybe it will be now presumably senior British Airways executives on that plane so they probably get the first chance to come out.
Absolutely, and just to remind you, once everybody disembarks from Concorde, they will all make their way down the celebrity red carpet that's been laid out below me. And as I say, the photographers and journalists are in massed ranks right below my perch, and they will be obviously trying to grab pictures and possible interviews with the celebrities and guests as they make their way down the red carpet. They don't seem to be able to hear inside Concorde that it's time to open the door.
Indeed, I gather, Felicity, that the chances are that it will in fact be media people, journalists, reporters who will have to come off first. We've got to tell the story. There's no point having these things unless the world knows about it. So I'm not quite certain who's going to get there first. That's Mary Nightingale's handbag, isn't it? Oh, no. No, not quite. Well, maybe. That would
She won't thank you for that.
That will need a posse of people to carry it. I don't know.
You're very rude.
As Felicity was saying, the important thing is to get the story out. It has been, I have to say, an amazing media operation. Many, many cameras. You've seen lots and lots of good pictures today on the ITV News channel. It's been a huge operation, a great recognition of the fact that this is a momentous day, a very sad day. I think people might have expected, when I was a lad, I thought supersonic flight would be the thing to... here comes... Oh, now we know. Stewardesses first. And is that not Lord Marshall? Is that the chairman of British Airways, I think? I'm staking my reputation.
That does indeed look like Lord Marshall.
And he will be giving a statement, and maybe he will be giving a hint. Look at carrying his own bag. What a democratic world it is. He'll be giving us some idea of what might be occurring with Concorde. That's Rod Eddington, the chief executive of British Airways, just shaken his hand. The man who really had to take the decision. Now, here come... there's a... first people coming off. Some chap coming down there saying, but I've missed my connection
I would
to
say that's a journalist.
It looks a bit like Nick Robinson, you know, but I don't suppose it is. I think he's
No.
busy worrying about Ian Duncan-Smith.
I should think Ian Duncan-Smith is worrying about Ian Duncan-Smith as well at the moment. But that's another story.
That's another story, Felicity. Here they come now, the people... Joan Collins?
Very good, Nick. Well recognised.
Thank you.
Now, is she going to stop for the cameras?
Oh, is Joan Collins going to stop
She's
for the
being
cameras?
asked.
Is Joan Collins going to stop for the cameras? That's one of those questions that doesn't need an answer, Felicity Barr.
You sound like you know her better than me.
Our Joni. Thank you so much. Oh, a kiss from the chairman and a kiss from the chief executive too? Not quite.
I should think it's going to be kisses all round, and she has got someone carrying her baggage by the looks of it.
Yes, of course.
Quite fitting that it's her first off, actually. She's
David
been one
Frost,
of
Sir David Frost.
Concorde's most frequent flyers, and Sir David Frost has the distinction, I think, of being definitely one of the most frequent flyers on Concorde.
Yes, he said today, he's been on the plane hundreds of times, he said it was the only way to be in two places at once. Hello, good evening and welcome. David.
Absolutely.
Now we're flicking around.
You can hear the shouts for Joan Collins below me. Is she going to stop for the cameras? Not sure what you're seeing at the moment, Nick.
We're at the top of the steps now, Felicity. Tell us, they look like some business types coming out now.
They do, don't they? I know that some of Concorde's most loyal customers have been invited on this final flight, but the majority were celebrities or indeed journalists, as Mary was saying earlier. But all of them will go down this red carpet at the moment. Joan Collins, I can tell you, has stopped for the photographers, smiling, and Sir David Frost doing the same.
There they are on the red carpet. Joan Collins and David Frost, two icons of our time, with the icon of Concorde behind them. What was it like? They're being asked, I don't doubt. David gives a wave. Hello, David.
David waving to us now.
As I keep saying, isn't it funny? Thumbs up for the end of an era. Slightly strange, isn't it?
Well, I think we're just celebrating what Concorde is and what she has been and what she has meant to the British, really, aren't we? Have to say, no sign of Mary yet. Waiting to see her emerge.
Indeed, we're seeing here on the ITV News channel the passengers coming off the very last commercial Concorde. Joan Collins was leading the way, as you might expect. Sir David Frost just behind her. stopping and talking and waving for the cameras.
Yes, I am. Not at the moment, no.
It's 5 o'clock here on the ITV News Channel. We're live at Heathrow Airport, watching passengers disembark from the final commercial Concorde flight that took 3.5 hours to cross the Atlantic today. That's Bernie Eccleston, the man just to your right of your picture, the Formula One boss, a very frequent flyer. The flight today was reserved for those people loosely called celebrities, VIPs, but also, but there's Joan Collins. Can we hear what she has to say?
They're trying to contact you.
No, we can't quite hear Joan at the moment.
They're trying to contact you.
Not able to hear what she's saying precisely. We will obviously be able to hear a little bit later what she has to say. Joan framed by another Concorde there. You're still watching people coming off. Never was there more interest in the contents of an airliner, I suppose. Those lucky enough, the 100 people lucky enough to have been on the final Concorde. David Frost speaking as well. Obviously, people will be interested here. I don't think we can hear him either. We will hear from him later. No doubt his thoughts will be interesting on the whole business of whether transatlantic travel now will be so much more arduous. Will he still want to do it quite so much? There was a time when David Frost seemed to be broadcasting on both sides of the Atlantic. Now there in the middle of our picture, our own Mary Nightingale.
Mary.
Good to see her. We were talking to her earlier. She was telling us what it was like to be on that flight, the excitement, confessing there's a colleague from the BBC in front of her, which I won't name, Jeremy Bowen, but there he is. Mary has got quite a heavy bag there. She was saying earlier that nobody minded if you wandered off with the odd napkin ring or two. That's our Mary about to say thank you very much to Rod Eddington. A couple of kisses for him. And Lord Marshall, the chairman, he gets kisses too. He doesn't greet me like that every day, I don't know. But there we are, this is a special one.
Who's that tall blonde girl down there?
Somebody waving happily. That's a man called Richard Quest. I know him well, a former BBC journalist, now works for CNN. Flamboyant fellow, he always was. There comes Mary. It would be lovely to have a quick word with her. We're not sure we can. We're in the hands of our people there on the ground. Mary, hello. Yes, nice to see you. Well, Felicity, did you manage to get a word with any of those people? You're a bit far away from them, aren't you?
I am perched above them, but I have to say that wave from Mary was for me, because I waved frantically to make her sure she was pointed in the right direction, in the direction of our camera. She looked absolutely delighted and very refreshed. And I think that's a makeup bag, actually, that she's carrying, a vanity case, not full of Concorde souvenirs. But certainly some of the celebrities are stopping along the way. So David Frost, we saw earlier, said it'd been a fantastic,
there's Matthew Parris, the
experience.
MP. Jodie Kidd in the middle of the red carpet there. Sorry to interrupt you, Felicity, just spotting Jodie Kidd.
Absolutely, she's actually quite hard to miss, isn't
And
she?
there's a man in the news
Morgan
at the
as well.
moment, in the middle. Yes, Piers Morgan, editor of the Daily Mirror. His newspaper have been carrying revelations by the royal butler Paul Burrell this week. He'd like to have his picture taken with Jodie Kidd. Well, who wouldn't? Sorry, Felicity, carry on. Please do.
Absolutely. See if I can get Piers to wave at us, but he's not going to. He's going straight on by. Typical journalist. Oh, no, he's going to stop and talk. Sadly, we can't hear what he's got to say. But yes, Jodie Kidd also on board that flight. Only 100 passengers, of course, allowed on this final flight because there are so few seats. But seem to be plenty of them still coming out at the moment.
It's an interesting point, Felicity, isn't it, that these sort of people, I mean, all right, there's some stars there's some journalists who would not in the normal course of events be going on this plane, but quite a lot of these people would have been regular users, business people, who will undoubtedly really miss Concorde.
Absolutely, and Mary was alluding earlier to the business people who really do value Concorde. The ability to get across the Atlantic to New York in the space of 3.5 hours effectively means you can travel over there and travel back in almost a day. And for high-flying executives and businessmen, well, that's invaluable because, as we all know, time is money in big business.
Here on the ITV News Channel, we're live at Heathrow Airport, seeing the last few now of the passengers disembarking from the final commercial flight of Concorde, which arrived back at a minute past 4. Arrived back at more like, I think it was 5 past 4. That's right, the final one. There's Jeremy Clarkson, the man of speed. He has been at great speed, 1,350 miles an hour maximum. But even so, it was interesting that the plane was slightly delayed. It was supposed to get in somewhere about 10 to 4, so it was about a quarter of an hour late.
It was, Nick. In fact, it was due to arrive early. We had been told earlier on it was due to arrive at about 10 to 4, about 10 minutes ahead of schedule. But the tailwinds that had helped her across the Atlantic obviously disappeared, and they encountered some sort of weather conditions which slowed her up somewhat.
There must have been some very tricky operations in the air to make sure that the other Concordes, because the one from Edinburgh landed just at 1 minute past 4, 90 seconds later the one that had gone around the Bay of Biscay, 90 seconds later the JFK one. But to get those planes in succession in the air, that would have been quite tricky, Felicity, wouldn't it?
It would, and earlier I was speaking to the head of air traffic control here at Heathrow, and he was saying they were absolutely determined, both themselves and of course British Airways, that these Concordes would arrive in quick succession. They knew, of course, the impact visually it would make, and of course audibly as well, because of the noise Concorde emits. But they were absolutely determined to have that visual impact of these 3 beautiful aircraft landing in quick succession. 90 seconds apart they estimated it would take, and I think they were pretty much on course. And we saw earlier it was a fantastic sight, and even the British weather held out for Concorde today.
Yes, it's obviously a beautiful, if very cold evening there. And now I think we've seen the last of the passengers. Well, they're still coming off. What's this gentleman? He's holding up something. We slightly missed that. Looks like a newspaper of some sort. Probably bringing the New York Times over, or just to emphasise, you know, the speed at which you can do things.
You were talking to Mary earlier, Nick, about souvenir hunters and what they've been taking from Concorde. I was speaking to one of the security guys earlier, and he was saying certainly in the last couple of months they've had to be very, very careful, because people were just simply hoovering up anything they could find on Concorde to take away, whether it was for personal pleasure or the fact that, of course, in years to come it's going to be quite valuable. We just don't know. But they were having to almost police their customers to ensure that they didn't take away all the silver napkin rings and any of the other bits and pieces that you find on board an aircraft these days. We think that they will be highly valuable in years to come. So they were almost on the point of searching people as they left the aircraft.
Indeed. Now we get the first pictures. This was actually on board the Concorde today as she was flying supersonically. There you see the, I imagine the first course. There's a chap with his Financial Times emphasising that this is very much a businessman's plane. This was the, and there you see, that's at the moment when the plane, that's the chairman of British Airways. Now, the moment when she reaches Mach 1, that's the speed of sound, flying at 28,000 feet now. There you hear the ripple of applause. This always happens. Mach 1, that's the speed of sound. There's Joan Collins enjoying a glass of champagne. And now the plane, look, there's the speed racing up now towards Mach 2. 48,000 feet, another 12,000 feet or so to go. To have this little, there we are, Mach 2, twice the speed of sound. There's usually another round of applause. You feel a little jolt as the plane. There's a carefully staged cheers. Well done, Lord Marshal. I'm not quite sure well done for what, closing Concorde down, but there you are, these things happen. It is such a strange thing. There's Joan again.
I'm very sad not only for myself, because I've used this flight so many times between New York and London, but I'm very sad for the future of civil aviation, because as far as I'm concerned, this was a huge step in technology and being able to travel supersonic speed. And the fact that it is being phased out, I think is quite shocking and very saddening.
How's it?
Well, there is an amazing excitement. I am very excited, and I feel like a kid. We were just saying, we feel like children sitting here. But of course, it's very weird to think that it's not going to be in the skies anymore. Yeah, it's such a beautiful, you know, machine that glides so beautifully, as they said on the TV, that it was like a swan in the sky. And especially when now I've had a child.
was the ballerina Darcy Bustle, and before her Joan Collins. Among the VIPs, there's a shot of the food. Oh, very nice indeed. That's the old smoked salmon there, isn't it? And the caviar on the top. Yeah, and there's the main course. Somebody did tell me what the main course was going to be, but remember, this plane is hurtling along at 1,350 miles an hour. This was the final flight across the Atlantic today. That's, I think, the end of the pictures. We go back now to the much quieter and rather undramatic live scene now at Heathrow, where the one on the left, the Concorde on the left, was the very last one to come in from New York. She touched down at 4 at Heathrow, a flight that lasted almost exactly 3.5 hours. And there's a Concorde now. I don't know quite what's happening. That seems to be a Concorde being towed away. We're hoping to hear quite shortly from Lord Marshall, the chairman of British Airways, who was on that flight. We saw him just now raising his glass, being asked to drink a toast to the end of Concorde. But perhaps he will be able to say in a speech we're expecting to hear in a few moments that it's not the end. Perhaps there will be some sort of reprieve, maybe a promise that she will fly. That's Rod Eddington, you can just see there shaking hands. He's the chief executive of British Airways. He's the man who's had to make the tough decision to scrap Concorde as a commercial proposition anyway, and not just, of course, he's the man facing the camera now with talking to the staff. He has also had to take some tough decisions about British Airways itself, especially in the wake of the September the 11th attacks in New York. There was a very sharp fall-off in carryings. All airlines suffered greatly. British Airways had a very bad time, and there's had to be a lot of redundancies, and that led to a lot of industrial unrest. There's also been the issue of trying to introduce more flexible working hours with a new swipe card system. That caused a lot of industrial unrest at Heathrow, and one very chaotic weekend when lots of people had their holiday flights disrupted. And we heard earlier on, we were announced here on the ITV news channel that the Transport and General Workers Union baggage handlers might be going on strike. We now have, again, more shots inside the plane today as she flew across the Atlantic. Some applause there from the lucky 100 who were on that final flight. Oh, and then now we're back at Heathrow. That's that yellowy sky there, a very, very chilly autumn sky. Frost's forecast for tonight. Chilly, perhaps appropriate that it should be chilly and cold as the era of supersonic travel is finally over. Certainly for lots of people travelling anyway. There may be Concordes that will fly at air shows. There may even be some attempt to keep one going to make special trips. It's been suggested that it might form part of some sort of special Queen's flight. People like Sir Richard Branson, who was here in the ITV News Channel earlier, he was saying that he would quite like to have had a Concorde as well. He had negotiations to try to get hold of one, but of course there is a lot of enmity between British Airways and Sir Richard Branson, going back quite a long way, and perhaps that prevented any sort of deal being done. Who knows? He talked earlier, Richard Branson, in this studio about friendly rivalry, and of course all airlines now face a very difficult market. One of the reasons that Concorde has not survived is that the number of business people willing to pay the thousands of pounds to cross the Atlantic in 3.5 hours each way has diminished sharply, partly because of the terrorist attacks in New York and Washington, but I think also the world is changing. People are a little less inclined to spend time in the air, rushing around the world. People are, younger business executives, a bit keener perhaps to spend a little bit more time with their families, get the work-life balance right. And I suppose in some ways Concorde represented rushing around at its most extreme. After all, who really needed to be in New York so desperately only 3.5 hours after leaving London? Sort of people who were extremely busy in the rest of their lives. So that market has fallen away, and despite the fact that many millions of pounds were spent refitting Concorde after the terrible crash in Paris, which many people died, of course, when that Air France Concorde came down, the refitting after that was done, the strengthening of tyres and the fuel tanks, the fitting of up-to-date electronic systems. That was at the time when I flew on Concorde myself to New York, the first Concorde to go back, and it seemed like the dawn of a new supersonic era, if you will. But it was not to be. We're just seeing now, we're waiting now, as I say, for Lord Marshall, the chairman of British Airways. And Felicity Barr, I don't know whether she is still with us. Felicity?
She certainly is.
Good, Felicity. I was just talking there about the decline in the market, really, that has forced Concorde out. It was ironic earlier on. I was saying to Richard Branson, we can see the cranes towering over the new Terminal 5 building site. We need more airports, presumably, and more runways and more terminals, but we don't need supersonic aircraft.
We don't, and I think part of the reason for that is that they can't carry enough passengers to service the needs of the flying public, of course. We've been saying all day it's quite cramped inside Concorde. I had a look inside one earlier, which was parked up nearby, and there are only 100 seats available. Now, when you consider, of course, that a jumbo jet can carry something like 350, 400 people, I guess economically it makes more sense to put all those people into the one aircraft instead of running 5 separate Concordes which burn up so much fuel and carry only 100 fare-paying passengers. It's simply a question of economics. Very sad, though.
Indeed, Felicity, thank you very much indeed. Just to remind you again that in the last quarter of an hour or so, we've seen the passengers disembarking from that final Concorde flight, the final commercial Concorde flight from New York to London. They were led down the steps by the redoubtable Joan Collins, who has been a very frequent flyer on Concorde. Sir David Frost was also there. It was interesting that Joan Collins was talking about not only the sadness that she feels, but also the fact that she thought it was very sad, a sort of setback for civilization, I think she put it.
Nick, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can, Felicity, indeed.
If you actually go to our live shot of the Concorde, which has just pulled up, where we saw celebrities coming off, I think you can see the final Concorde captain just disembarking right now, and his crew. You were quite right, they stayed right until the very end, and now they are disembarking after all their guests have finally left the stage, as it were. So the final Concorde crew, I guess they're going to line up for a final picture too.
And as tradition dictates, the captain is at the back. He leaves the ship last, doesn't he? Yes.
Quite an emotional day for him, I'm sure. I wonder how many flights he's made across the Atlantic in the Big Bird.
Captain Bannister, 54 years old. There he is.
What?
I've had lots of chats with the captain. I was out in the countryside and Concorde flew over one day, and a few days later I said to him, "You came over me." He said, "Where were you?" And I told him the time, and he said, "I know exactly where that is." He knew exactly where his plane was. He's a very, very canny man.
It's amazing. I'm not sure whether you can see, but actually all 5 of British Airways operational Concordes are now in my line of sight. They're all parked up alongside each other. One's in the hangar, and then the other 4 are parked on the concrete outside. And of course, these were the last 5 operational Concordes, the ones that were flight worthy, and of course they're now being decommissioned. Quite a sight.
Indeed, we're just looking at the one, but I think we can now hear what Joan Collins had to say.
The captain was fantastic. The weather was perfect in New York. We had a fantastic send-off. There were planes circling around us when we left, and loads of people waving. I think a lot of people glad to see the back of Concorde because they don't like it when it lands. And a very nice flight, very uneventful, but fun. A couple of people, yeah, there are some people on board that have been doing it twice a week for 20 years. Okay, thanks.
That was Joan Collins, and speaking just after she came off the plane. And let's listen. Oh, there's now there's a royal visitor, Duke of. Should we have a go at Gloucester? And someone will say no, it's not. With the chairman of British Airways, Lord Marshall. And I think we can hear what... No, we were hoping to hear from 1 or 2 of the others, but let's just stay with this just for the moment. Sir David Frost now.
Service, there wouldn't be the emotion, but with Concorde there's real emotion today. It's quick and it's got a special friendly sort of club-like atmosphere to it, really. I think that's what it is. Cheers, cheers.
Well, that was Sir David Frost. He was an extremely frequent flyer. Years ago, he used to do television programmes on both sides of the Atlantic, a feat that would not have been possible without the services of the supersonic airliner Concorde. With another interesting point, Felicity was saying, can we see them? You could almost see all 5 Concordes that Felicity was talking about now. One in the hangar just immediately to your left, the one that arrived from New York left, and then the other 3, the other 2 furthest from where you can see now, they were the ones that flew in from Edinburgh in the Bay of Biscay. The one on the right, Felicity Barr, I think that's the plane that you went on earlier, that you had a look inside.
Yes, I've decided that she's my Concorde. She's known as Charlie Alpha, and she's been here all day providing us with a backdrop for our media broadcast today. And yes, I was lucky enough on the ITV Lunchtime News to get a peek inside her and get an idea of what it's like to be inside one of these beautiful aircraft. And I have to say, I was quite surprised how cramped it was inside.
Christy,
just 100 seats.
Felicity, just a moment, let's hear Christy Brinkley.
It was fabulous, yes, but we could see them out our window. That was so thrilling. And it was great. Okay.
Well, that was more enthusiasm. That was great. She was saying, talking there, Felicity, about the fact that Mary Nightingale mentioned this too, didn't she? That they could see out of the windows the other Concordes, they could see the thousands of people. That was a real thrill to be in that aircraft, but a real thrill for you on the ground too. The atmosphere there must have been electric today.
It was fantastic, and I'm obviously with the media contingent, so not many members of the public, mostly media contingent and BA staff, but the atmosphere was one of excitement. And I have to say, the sight of 3 Concordes arriving back to back within 90 seconds of each other, it was almost like a fly past, really, something I've never seen before. I think it's been done once before, I was being told by a pilot I interviewed earlier.
Listen, just a moment, Felicity, we've got Jodie Kidd had a few words, but she's moved on, Felicity. I'm sorry to have interrupted you there.
That's right, I don't mind being interrupted by the likes of Jodie Kidd. Yes, no, I was saying it was something like a fly past as we stood here and watched them come in. And the really nice thing was it was clear weather, it wasn't cloudy, because I know that BA staff were very worried that the impacts of the images might have been impaired by cloud or fog this afternoon, but it couldn't have been better, really, as a scene setter. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed for the moment, Felicity. Well, we've seen and heard from, we heard a bit from Sir David Frost, from Joan Collins, and we also, interestingly enough, saw them on the plane as well, all to emphasise, of course, that on the ITV Evening News at 6:30 we will have a full report on Concorde's final day, particularly what it was like to actually be on the aircraft. My colleague Mary Nightingale was there. And this is all the Concordes that are available now to British Airways, drawn up in front of you there. Felicity, one of the things that Richard Branson was saying, and we've remarked on this, is that Air France, nothing like the celebrations or anything over there, they presumably have their unhappy memories of Concorde. That must have had a lot to do with it.
I think it must have done, yes. I mean, you've got to remember back in the 1950s when the British and the French got together. An incredible act of diplomacy, really, when you consider the enmity between the 2 countries in the past. But they got together and they created this supersonic jet. They were as excited as the British about this wonderful aircraft. But of course, that terrible crash back in 2001 just outside Paris, I think probably took the gloss off Concorde for the French, and not surprising, really. And we really didn't hear much of the way of celebration, of commemoration of Concorde when Air France finally pulled its remaining aircraft. I think they pretty much left it to the British to celebrate what has been a truly wonderful part of aviation history. So yes, I think the British have taken on the baton and raced over the line with it, and the French have just quietly let Concorde rest without too much fuss.
Well, for the moment, Felicity Barr at Heathrow, thank you very much indeed. Coming up here on the ITV News Channel, Steve Scott will be here. He'll have more on a day that made history, the final flight of Concorde. We're also going to hear from the chairman of British Airways, so do stay with us.
Give me a bite.
Jack, whatever's come over you?
What a carry-on.